the Clayman Institute for Gender Research at Stanford University. Reinvigorating gender equality in the 21st century.
I'm delighted to welcome you here to hear Professor Rick Banks talk about his new book, Is Marriage for White People? All too often, people who study race, and people who study gender, but we all certainly know that as actual individuals encounter major social institutions like marriage, they do so as people that are both simultaneously raced and gendered. And so understanding how those things work together and how they affect our experiences in major social institutions is really important. And I'm just delighted that he's back here at Stanford to talk with us about the book that he's written. So welcome, Rick.
I should probably start with the issue that has gotten me into the most trouble with this book. There has been more trouble than I expected. One of my favorite statistics related to the book is every single time I talk about it on a radio show, and this is in major cities, actually in all cities though, there's at least one person who calls in and says that I'm promoting racial genocide and self-annihilation or some variant of that. And the title comes from an article which I had read that was in the Washington Post, in which a young black boy in the city of Washington, D.C. told a reporter that marriage is for white people. And he told the reporter this because the reporter said, or the child said, you know, we want to learn about how to be good parents and how to be good fathers. The reporter said, great, I'll bring in some married couples to talk to you about parenting. And he said, no, we don't care about parenting. We just want to know, we don't care about marriage. We just want to know about parenting. And then another kid said, yeah, marriage is for white people. And that struck the reporter because it was the starkest expression you could imagine of what these children experienced in their social world in Southeast Washington, D.C., which is that marriage had declined so much among African Americans that they didn't think black people got married. They thought marriage was something that other people did. All right, so that's the first meaning of the title. And that's the attention-getting one. It captures all the emotional energy of the marriage decline among African Americans, which is unprecedented historically in our nation. But I also like the title for another reason, because there's another meaning to the title. We could also think of the title as, you could think of the title as, is marriage for white people but not for black people, but you could also think of it as, well, is marriage even for white people? Right? So a white person could look at the title and say, oh, you're asking, is marriage for me? And they usually have an answer, no, yes, you know. And that's intentional, that it has that secondary meaning. Is marriage even for white people? Because the goal of the book, the sort of starting point of the whole project, is to connect the experiences of African Americans to the experiences of all Americans. There are three big issues that I highlight. One is the marriage decline. Marriage has declined throughout American society during the past half century. That decline has been greatest among African Americans. Nearly 70% of black women are unmarried. But white women too are more likely than ever to be unmarried. For African Americans in particular, the marriage decline spans the socioeconomic spectrum, so that even when you look at college-educated black women, they're more likely to be married than less educated black women, but they're less likely to marry than their white college-educated counterparts. So there's a racial gap in marriage that spans the socioeconomic spectrum. We see it among women, we also see it among men. Right? Black men at every income and education level are less likely to marry than white men, even as white men are less likely to be married today than they were 40 or 50 years ago. For whites, white women are about 5 times as likely now to earn more than their husband compared to 40 years ago. 40 years ago, only a few percent of whites earned more than their husband. Now it's about 25%. But among African Americans, we see an even bigger shift. And this is one of the statistics that's really startled me. Among college-educated black wives, so these are college-educated African-American women who are married, more than half of them are better educated than their husbands. And that educational gap is very significant because education is more related to earnings now than at any time over the past several decades. Pivotal factor here in both of these developments is that although women are doing better, which is a good thing, men are doing worse. And this is especially the case among well, it's true generally, right? More women than men graduate college nationally, but it's especially the case for African Americans. Again, you know, as a father of boys, right? This is This is part of it. This book was very difficult to write, right? Very difficult to write. 1 in 10 black men is in prison as we speak. These are men in their 20s, early 30s. It's actually a little bit more than 1 in 10. 1 in 10 are in prison. Estimates are that 1 in 4 will go to prison or jail at some point during their life. At the other extreme, nearly twice as many black women as men graduate from college. Now, we don't see that here, and you don't see that at other elite colleges because we pick our classes. But nationwide, nearly twice as many black women as men graduate from college. So women are moving ahead, men are falling behind. That's one underlying factor. There are many of them. That's one underlying factor that contributes both to the marriage decline and to the increase in couples where wives earn more than their husbands. There's a third issue that I spend a lot of time on, and this is probably the one that people focus on the most. And here, there's a puzzle. The puzzle is that black women, this is what pulled me through the book, really pulled me through, is that black women have the smallest pool of potential partners within their within their race, right? Because so many black men are incarcerated, or unemployed, or not in school, and so forth, right? So black women have the smallest pool of men within their race, yet black women are also the least likely to marry outside of their race. Why don't more black women have the relationships that they want? When I went out and interviewed people and I talked to women around the country, I thought I might find a lot of people who said, I'm not married, I don't want to be married, and I'm taking a principal position. But in fact, I didn't find that. I found that a lot of people actually do. A lot of women wanted, like most people, a partner. And that's not the be-all and end-all of life. It doesn't mean your life is bad, and it doesn't mean that it's a lost cause, but it does mean that having a partner is maybe something that would make my life even better. And there were a lot of women who said they wanted a partner. And then I began to think about the book in terms of this puzzle. If there are fewer men within the race, why don't more black women find that partner outside of the race? In the same way that black men and people of other races have already done. Right? So that became the orienting question of the book. The book is also a feminist book, I think, in that, and this was probably the most difficult thing, one of the most difficult things for me, is that the book does open up relationships between African American men and women in particular, but also men and women generally, and highlights the different interests and the power struggle that often occurs within those relationships. The model of relationships that I use in this book is one that we could say is drawn from sociology, because there's some sociologists who embrace it. You could say it's drawn from economics, because there's some economists who embrace it. But the model of relationships is not one where you look into each other's eyes and you find your soulmate and you love and care for each other because you just love and care for each other so much, right? It's really one in which relationships are negotiations. Relationships are negotiations in which people act instrumentally to try to accomplish a goal, and as with any negotiation, the outcome of the negotiation depends on the power that the parties bring to the relationship. And there are a lot of sources of power in a relationship, but one source of power is the options that each party has outside of the relationship, so that if, with men and women, with black men and women in particular, if you have few men, because a lot of them are in prison for reasons that are not of their own making, for these big reasons, right? We have black men who are not doing well. But if you have few black men who are out and are good partners potentially, right, or good prospects, and then you have a lot of women, that numbers imbalance means that the men have more options than the women. And more options translates into more power, fewer options into less power. And that's true even if nobody ever invokes that power, or nobody ever refers to that options. Is something that we all sort of know. So that's the framework for the book. And with black men and women, it might be that it is the case that black men have too much power and that black women have too little power. And that results from this numbers imbalance that is starker among African Americans than for any other group. And that just screws up relationships when the power is that far out of whack. Unpacking this puzzle about why black women are the least likely to marry out is that I sort of unpack all the different things that keep black women segregated in their relationships even as other groups are increasingly integrated. And that's a conversation that exists where, at least I think, that before there was silence, right? Or at least not much discussion, right? So it's a conversation about things that we don't usually talk about, right? It's a conversation about the fact that lots of black women want black babies, and they want black babies because they want to be able to, raise the next generation of the black race. They want black babies because they are worried about being mistaken for the nanny. They want black babies because they worry about their child being so light that the child could pass for white, and they don't want a child who could pass for white, because if the child could, the child might not identify with them. It talks about the fear on both sides of the racial divide that people have about a partner's family not accepting them, about a black woman who thinks that a white partner's family, say, would not accept her, and frankly about a white man who thinks that a black woman's family won't accept him. A potent sense that a lot of people have that for black women to cross the racial line in their search for a partner is to do something that in some way is disloyal or unnatural, or in some way an abandonment of black men. And certainly a lot of black men feel that, but also a lot of black women feel that, right? And this sense is accentuated by the fact that black women are doing so much better than black men, right? Nearly twice as many black women as men graduate from college, and that creates a tug on many to kind of, stand by the man, bring him along, uplift the race, progress together, rather than progress alone. Is that you might have better relationships with men of another race who share socioeconomic class, share educational aspirations, share professional experiences, than with black men with whom one does not share all that other stuff. And then the final point, and this is another one that's got me in a lot of trouble, is that, to the extent, part of the problem with African American relationships, again, is that the men have too much power, the women have too little. And when black women expand their own options and counter that power disparity and create a more equal level playing field, so to speak, that might actually result in African American couples having better relationships. Right? And that results in African American couples having better relationships because, one factor, I think, and this is, one factor in the racial gap in marriage, even among the affluent, is that there's simply too many women given the number of available men, and when you have lots of women and few men, marriage rates decline because men, more than women, tend to prefer relationships that might be non-marital, non-monogamous, non-committed. I'll just put that out there. Men might tend to prefer relationships that are non-marital, non-monogamous, non-committed, at least at certain points in life. And when you have few men and a lot of women, men are able to be the deal makers, and women have to be the deal takers. When women have better options, power becomes more even. When the power is more imbalanced, women can become more the deal makers and can then achieve relationships with men that are more to their liking, which may more likely be relationships that are committed, that are monogamous, and that might result in marriage. All right, so the ultimate paradox the book rests on is that although we see interracial marriage, or some people see interracial marriage as an abandonment of the race or a betrayal of the race, it actually serves the race. Right? That even if black women are concerned especially about the stability of African American families, the best thing individual women can do to promote that stability is, ironically, to open themselves to relationships with people of other races, and thereby equalize the power balance between men and women and put all African American relationships on a more stable footing.